So let's talk about splash pads. I know we're thinking, oh, looking outside today. Oh, we're not thinking about summer yet, but it's here. It's around the corner, and we're going to be opening up these splash pads before we know it. Now, what does this? There is a state code around splash pads, and what they don't necessarily say it's a splash pad. What they call is an interactive water feature. An interactive water feature. What that means, it's a recirculating water feature that's designed and installed for use in recreation, in which there is direct water features from that feature from the public when not in operation. All water drains freely, so there is no ponding. Okay, that is the code. That's the definition for it. The Utah Administrative Code R392302 that deals with anything swimming pool, aquatic, water feature, spas related. Okay, so this is the code that we're going to be really referring to as we go through this session today. So just some features of our splash pads. Okay, a splash pad is zero depth. There's no standing water. Okay, there's nozzles and fountains and buckets and showers, and there's some interactive components to this. You may have a button that a user has to run over and push in order to make the features turn on. There may be a spray gun that they can move around and spray their mom and dad with. But these splash pads, they are becoming more intricate, and they're sometimes being geared for older users. And we've got splash pads out there that could be geared towards that younger age demographic, those toddler ages and things like that. But for the most part, these are for our school age kids. These are for our elementary school age kids, and the early teenagers and things like that. But those are the only people that are using our splash pads. That's why we've got to be really hyper aware of some of the concerns that come along with these splash pads. A lot of folks, these splash pads, the water isn't heated, and so they're running through. It's like you were when you were growing up. Those carefree days where you could go run on the lawn with the grass and have the sprinkler spraying on you and things like that. This is kind of harkening back to those days. There are other splash pads that are more intricate that the water is heated. Okay, they do heat the water so that the water is warm coming out of there, so it's not like running through the cold sprinklers. Just have lots of different features, lots of different splash pad areas that we can look at. What are some benefits of those splash pads? There's a very low chance of drowning in these facilities. Okay, but anywhere where there's standing water, people can drown in an inch of water. All right. Even though there's a low chance of drowning, the chance of drowning is not eliminated with the splash pad. There can still be a chance that somebody drowns in a splash pad. It doesn't take more than an inch of water, and someone could drown in that inch of water. That's why it's important that we make sure that we're keeping up on these things, make sure there's no pooling and things like that. We'll talk about that here as we're going through today. Some of the other benefits, minimal supervision. They're not required to have lifeguards, okay? Which is nice. We don't have to have a maintenance person there 24/7. We don't have to have full-time staff or part-time staff there, making sure that things are going okay and supervising the kids as they're playing. They cost a lot less than a swimming pool, right? Those of you who have built recreation centers or have looked into bonding for recreation centers or aquatic centers and things, the cost associated with those. There's a lot associated with that. Okay? Splash pads cost a lot less than that. They're cool. There are some cool functions. There are some cool things that you can do in a splash pad. Okay, you can have a lot of cool features. You can do some cool branding and some cool theming and things like that. But there are some detractors from splash pads. There are some things that could cause us to think, is this really the best thing for us and our organization? We'll talk about some of those today and what some of those concerns are as we move forward. Okay, here's some of them. Slips and falls. Slips and falls are big in splash pads. Kids running on the deck there, slipping and falling. It's wet, it's slippery. Okay, collisions. Not only running into each other, kids running around running into each other, but running into the equipment, right? Running into the pole or to the water feature. Okay, slipping and falling and hitting their head or hitting their arm on something. Nearby non-compatible use areas. These are things like landscaping and rocks and buildings and other things that are around the area in which the splash pad is built. Cuts and lacerations from things on the deck or protrusions from the from the poles and things like that. Sanitation, making sure that we can keep the water safe. Okay, just because it's not a swimming pool and a standing body of water doesn't mean we don't have to treat the water. The water still has to be treated like it was a swimming pool. Has to have an appropriate amount of sanitation, chlorine, and the water has to be kept in proper balance. Okay, there's still those factors that are in play, as well as sanitation from it's open to the environment. Okay, you have folks who could walk their dogs on the splash pad when they shouldn't be walking their dogs. You could have birds or other animals with their droppings that congregate on your splash pads. Okay, and then the chemical and the equipment hazards that go along with the splash pad. The splash pad is such a small body of water. The holding tank is such a small body of water that anytime a chemical is out of balance, a chlorine is out of balance, or your pH is out of balance, or something happens, it really sends the system for a loop, because a small deviation in the chemical composition of that splash pad is going to really going to change how your chemicals are balanced out, just because of the small body of water that it is. Okay, so let's keep going. Just some rules and regulations and things around splash pads. There are no national or international consensus on standards. Okay, there's no overarching aquatic health code like there is with a swimming pool. Utah and other states have kind of developed their own regulations, mostly to govern health concerns. Okay, many different pool regulations still apply. What you want to do is really you want to check out this site here. This is the state code, this R392-302. That is the design and construction and operation of the public pool site. It's got a lot of information on there on swimming pools and proper operation and things like that. At the very end is really where it talks about these interactive water features, these splash pads. Okay. And one of the other things we could do is research and networking. Those are huge when we're looking at splash pads and the proper and safe way to run a splash pad. Talking with other organizations who have those features already, the pain points they went through in design and implementation and running the splash pads. Because there are some very different things about a splash pad versus a swimming pool, or a splash pad and a water feature that you might have in your park. Okay, that's like a fountain or something like that. Very different applications. So researching and networking, getting in tune with the Utah Recreation and Parks Association. They have an aquatics section where there are many aquatics professionals who run splash pads as well as their swimming pools. Okay, getting in touch with those people at the URPA level, and getting involved in their committees and making yourself known, even if you don't have an aquatic center or a swimming pool, but you do have a splash pad. That is a great group to network with, so that you can get in with them and ask questions around the splash pads. You can check out their website, urpa.org, and they're, again, that's a state organization, lots of professionals there. They really know their stuff when it comes to these splash pads. Okay. As you're looking at designing, okay, if you're looking at designing your splash pads, there in the state code, there are specific design details that you have to abide by, but so you can make sure that you stay in compliance with the state code. Okay. Consulting with your local health department is very highly recommended, so you make sure that you stay within those state code guidelines. Make sure you have backflow protection on your system. Okay, and make sure that, again, you have to meet specialty pool requirements for disinfection. We'll talk about what those are and how we can make sure we stay within those barriers here in just a minute. Okay, all parts of the interactive water feature shall be designed, constructed, maintained, and operated so that there are no slip, fall, or other safety hazards. That is right from the state code. This is what's going to govern us as we move forward in our splash pad design and our splash pad and the running of those splash pads. Okay, this R392, 302, 41, 2B. Okay, that is the code that says this is what we have to do. We have to make sure we maintain, we operate, we design, and we construct them so that there's no slip and fall hazards or other safety hazards present. Okay, just because it's not a swimming pool doesn't mean we don't have to take care of it like it really was a swimming pool. Okay, We'll talk about that, what that really means. So how do we eliminate or mitigate or lessen the slip, trip, and fall hazards? Because let's be honest, slippery floor, you're going to have people slipping, right? It's wet, people are going to slip and fall. Follow the manufacturer's guidelines. Jason and I say this a lot, is you have to keep your user's manuals. Yes, you do. Okay. Follow the manufacturer's guidelines for how we have to operate these facilities. Okay. The decks for these are usually made of broomed concrete or crumbled rubber or something like that, that has a little bit of a rougher texture so that it kind of gives you more a larger coefficient of friction is what it's called, so that you reduce the chance of a slip. Okay. It has to meet ANSI standards. There are certain standards around flooring that it has to meet. It mentions those in the state code, as well as your manufacturer. When they install that splash pad, they have to make sure they're maintaining to those ANSI standards. The flooring has to be free of cracks or open joints. Okay. This time of year, before you start up those splash pads, is a great time to make sure that your flooring is free of cracks and open joints. Okay. Going around and having the maintenance folks go around and making sure that they're putting caulk down or waterproof sealant or something in the cracks and open joints, so that we make sure we don't get those toe grabbers and things that kids could really stub their toes on and lacerate feet and toes in. There also has to be a 3-foot deck surrounding each of the features. Okay. So there has to be you have your splash pad area where all your features are, where all your toys and your water spray features. There's got to be a 3-foot barrier or decking area around that, so that there is a barrier between the walkway or the place that is not designated as the splash pad and the splash pad itself. We have to make sure we document regular inspections. Okay. These are things that we can't just open once for the summer and be done with it, or open once a day and be done with it. Okay. These regular inspections have to be done, where we walk through each of the facility and we check the nozzles, we check the ground, we check the features, we check the slides, we check everything, and we make sure on a daily basis that things are in ship shape and they're ready to go for the public to get into. And if it's not appropriate, then we close it. And what are the measures that we take to close our facilities, and how do we secure them? How do we make sure that people aren't accessing the facility when we don't want them to? Okay, let's keep going. We've got a lot to cover today. We talk about nearby non-compatible uses. Okay, these are things that we talk about. Looking at the location of your splash pad and the interactive features that are there. Okay, avoid building near playgrounds with wood chips, gravel, and sand fall material. Why do we want to do that? Because you don't want that stuff in your system. Okay, you don't want that stuff getting into the drains. You don't want the sand and the gravel getting into your recirculation system and fouling your pumps, and getting in and gunking up your filters. Okay, avoid playgrounds with wood chips and things like that. Look around for the electrical services. Where is the electrical coming in? Do you have a breaker box or electrical boxes, big electrical boxes around? No, we don't want to build by those things. What about sharp objects or structures, things like rocks and other landscaping features that we think might look pretty, okay, but might not necessarily be the right thing that we want to have right by our splash pad. All right, remember that 3-foot use area. You got to have that 3-foot deck area around, and then around that deck area, look at what landscaping is around there. Okay, is it just grass? Is it just concrete? Do we have other features there that people could slip and fall and potentially get hurt on? All right, food consumption areas. Where are the picnic tables located? Do we have food trucks coming to the parking lot? And is it right next to where the splash pad is, so that people can take their food and go into the splash pad area? Okay, this is something to be aware of. What about things like highways and rivers? Those areas that we could have high volumes of traffic, or there's a river flowing right by our proposed area for our splash pad. Now, that's probably not the best area to put a splash pad. Okay, where you have children with water. Okay, we all know that the children plus water can always, if we're not careful, lead to drownings. Okay, so we got to be careful on these use areas where we have our splash pads located. Be aware of the landscaping that we have put in around our splash pads, so that we can make sure that the people stay safe when they're coming to use that area. Now, collision hazards. Okay, we got to make sure we post rules because again, these aren't supervised areas. We don't have lifeguards out there with whistles and telling people to walk and things like that. Okay, so we got to make sure we post rules. Okay, these rules, they say no running and things like that. Make sure that they're enforced regularly. What do we mean by enforced if we don't have people there all the time watching and supervising? Now, what I think that means is that we just make our presence known. Okay, what that means is if we drive around and every hour or every 2 hours or whatever, we have a parks maintenance person or the person who's responsible for the maintenance of the facility drive by in a city marked or an organization marked vehicle, that does a lot to detract bad behavior. Okay. And getting out and walking around does a lot to detract bad behavior. Okay. So just getting out and walking around, picking up the trash, keeping the park clean, keeping the splash pad clean, that's going to help to avoid some of these collision hazards, things like running around, and we're there. If we're there, we see people running on the deck or around the splash pad area. It's okay to tell people to walk. Hey, remember to walk, buddy. Don't run. Don't run around here. Stay safe. Okay. Make sure you're identified correctly. Make sure you have city apparel on. You have a shirt, a hat, something that identifies you as an organization employee. But it's important to be present at these splash pads. It's not just go and turn them on in the morning and turn them off at night. We got to be present. Okay. We got to make sure that we're enforcing some rules when we're there. All right. Removing non-feature equipment. You'll have folks who come and they want to take a lawn chair and they want to put it in the splash pad because it is hot outside and they want to get sprayed a couple of times and they want to be able to watch their kids or whatever it may be. Make sure that those things stay out of the splash pad. Only featured equipment, only things that are authorized should be allowed inside of that splash pad area. Okay. And again, document your efforts. Document. This is when we were there. This is what we did. This is when we walked through and picked up trash and whatever it was. Okay. Those kind of checklists and those kind of documentations on a daily basis are very, very important. And they will help in case there is something that happens in these splash pads. All right. Let's keep going. What about cuts and punctures? Okay. Gotta include rules. This has to be on your rules. No glass, no foreign objects. Okay. No glass around the splash pad or on the splash pad or in the area around the splash pad. Okay. Make sure you inspect for sharp objects. When you open up the facility each morning, make sure you're walking it. Make sure you're walking the splash pad and making sure that there's no sharp objects or protrusions or things that kids can get cut or punctured on. When we're going around and doing our checks on an hourly or semi-hourly basis, what are we doing? Okay. Let's walk around. Let's make sure we're sweeping the deck or we're picking up garbage. And again, documenting our maintenance and removal efforts. This is what we had to do today. This is what we had to remove. These are things that we've had to sweep up or whatever it is. And we've got to be there and we have to be present. This just goes back to that situation where we just have to be there. We have to be there. We've got to be present. All right. Now let's talk about sanitation. Hey, you don't want the baby Ruth in the pool, right? Don't want the baby Ruth at the splash pad. So restroom and diaper changing areas have to be within walking distance. Okay, they got to be within 15 feet. You got to have a restroom diaper changing area in the same complex so that people can get to the restroom or people can change the kids' diapers in the restroom area, not on the deck, not by the splash pad. Okay, you don't want that happening. You should have a fecal accident response protocol. Something that if something happens, you have a fecal accident at the splash pad, what do you do? How do you close the pool down? How long does the splash pad stay closed for? What kind of fecal accident was it? Is it a form stool or is it a loose stool? Okay, those kind of things are really going to drive the kind of sanitation or the kind of closure that you're looking at. Okay, so having a written fecal accident response plan is absolutely critical. This is when we close the facility. This is how long we have to stay closed. This is what we have to do in order to get back open again. Okay? And being able to document that. If there is a fecal accident, how do we document that? This is when it was closed. This is what we did. This is when we reopened. Okay? And documenting the chemical readings. This is what the chlorine readings were at and the pH were at when we closed the facility. This is what we did, raised it to these levels, and then we closed it, and then we opened it back up when the levels returned back to a normal state. Okay. It's important that we have phone numbers on these on our rule signs so that people can call if there is a fecal accident. Okay, because again, we're not there, we're not staffing it the whole time. If we're going around every hour or a couple of hours, something can happen. You know, we leave it at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we're coming back at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and something happens at 2:30. We got to know about it. We have to have a way to know about it, that there has been an accident that we need to close that facility for so that our people can stay safe. Okay, so that we can stay healthy. Your recirculating systems, okay, they must meet chlorine limits. They must meet the limits of the sanitation. Okay, we'll talk about that here in just a minute. It is very best practice to have a secondary disinfectant system like a UV for crypto control. Okay, that is, you know, just part of the state code again, R392, 302, 35, and 8 is where it talks about that. But that secondary disinfectant system is very, very important. Something like UV or ozone or something that is outside of the regular chlorine that is going to help you if there is a crypto outbreak or if there is a fecal accident. Okay, it'll help your downtime be less. Okay, it's not required, but it is best practice. Okay, it is required that we have a pH and ORP controller. What that means is we have a computer controlled way or method to dose our chemical. Okay, so that when we add our hydrochloric or muriatic acid, or when we add the chlorine into the pool, that is done in an automated way. We have that controller that does that for us. And we have to ensure that all water turns over in at least 30 minutes. So we have to make sure that all of the water that is flowing through our system is seen by chemical and is treated by chemical and through our filters in at least 30 minutes. Okay. So how do we know if that's happening though? How do we know if we're getting that correct turnover rate? Okay. What we want to do is you want to take whatever the total gallons is of your facility. Okay, of that pool, or of that splash pad, of the holding tank. Usually those holding tanks are about 150 gallons. On the regular, they're about 150 gallons. Okay. Don't take that as gospel though. Figure out what it is for your system. Some systems may be a lot more, some systems may be less. Okay. But you have to figure out what the total gallonage is of your system at that splash pad. Okay. And you're going to figure your turnover rate from that total gallonage and the gallons per minute from your flow meter. Okay. So every one of these facilities has to have a flow meter that says how much water is going through your pipes and your filters. So how many gallons per minute is needed to achieve that 30-minute turnover rate? Well, what you're going to do is you're going to take your total gallons and you're going to divide it by 30. And whatever number you get there, that is the minimum amount of gallons per minute that you have to be pushing through your system in order for your entire system to see chemical and to see filter within that 30-minute time period. Okay. So how do you figure what your current turnover rate is? You take to figure out your current turnover, you take your total gallons that you have and divide it by whatever the gallons per minute that your flow meter is telling you. Okay. And if that turnover is less than the 30 minutes, okay, as you plug that back into the equation previous, if you figure out that it's less than, if my gallons per minute is less than what I need it to be, then you need to do something. You need to backwash your filters. You need to increase the amount of filters you have, or increase the amount of gallons in your pool, or something, in order for you to meet that 30-minute turnover rate that is required by the state. Okay, that is state code, state requirement that we've got to do that. So we've got to make sure that you know what your turnover rate is for your specific facility. Okay, it's very important that we know that, so that we make sure that all of the water is being treated in a way that we need it to be treated, and that complies with the state code of 30 minutes that it has to turn over. Okay. So we talk about chlorine and pH. Let's talk about chemicals for a minute. Okay, chlorine, that's that ORP. Okay, that is the abbreviation there that is used in the industry is ORP. Okay, chlorine and pH. What we have to do is we have to test that stuff. And when we're testing our chlorine and pH, make sure you're using an approved NSF ANSI standard or ANSI standard 50 DPT kit. Okay. What this is they have some electronic ones. They have ones others that are droplets. They have ones that are pill form. Okay. You just have to make sure you're using a correct and approved standard DPD type kit. Okay. Now, what ranges do my chemicals have to fall within? My pH has to be within 7.2 and 7.8. Okay, if your pH reading isn't between 7.2 and 7.8, you have an issue. You've got to close the facility or the pool until you get into that range that you need to be in. If your pH is between 7.2 and 7.6, there's your minimum chlorine reading. I would think it should be at least a 2.0. Your pH is between 7.7 and 8.0. Minimum chlorine reading has to be a 3. Okay. So there are two different tests you're doing here. You're doing a test for chlorine, your free chlorine, and you're doing a test for your pH. Okay. Make sure you know how to use those kits. Make sure that your people who are testing the water know how to use these things. And when do we do it? When do we test our chemicals? When should we be testing our chemicals? Okay. Prior to opening. Every day, prior to opening the facility, prior to turning the water on for the public to go out and use, you got to test your chemicals. You got to test your water, making sure that your chemicals are in balance and where they should be. Okay. And then the best practice is to do it regularly. And that best practice is every 2 hours. Every 2 hours, somebody is there on site testing the chemicals. Okay. Testing the chlorine and the pH, making sure that they are staying in the right values. And then when the facility is closed for the evening, okay, when the water turns off, check them again and see and make sure that they're still in a good area. And it's important that we check the chemicals throughout the day. A lot of us may, we're thinking, oh, we're just going to test them in the morning before we open. We'll test them in the evening, maybe one time throughout the day. But think about it. If it's a warm day, you're going to have a lot of bathers using that facility. If you're testing at 9 in the morning and you don't test again until 2 in the afternoon, think of how many people could have gone through there. Then you don't test again until 7 o'clock at night or 8 o'clock at night. Okay. There's a lot of gap there where you can have chlorine or pH or things that are going funky in the chemical room. And you've got bodies in the water. You've got sunscreen. You've got things going on. We have to make sure that our chemicals are in balance the entire time we're open. Okay. So that regular testing, that best practice of every 2 hours is something we really want to try and get behind. Okay. And make sure you're documenting those readings every single day. Document the readings. Document this is what the pH was at this time. This is what the chlorine was at this time. Okay. Make sure you're documenting all of these things. Okay. And if the numbers are ever outside of that area, close it. Close the facility, close it down until it gets into an area where it's within the numbers prescribed. Okay. It's great if you have somebody on staff who's a CPO, a certified pool operator, or an AFO, an aquatic facility operator. Those kind of people, they know, they've gone through training. They know the things that they have to do in order to balance out your water. All right. If you don't have somebody trained as a CPO or AFO and you have a splash pad, we highly recommend that you get them that certification, that CPO or AFO, because then they're going to know what they need to do in order to bring these chemicals back into balance. If there's an issue with a filter, they might know how to help with that. They're going to know how to backwash the pool. They're going to know how to backwash the filter to make sure that we have clean water going in so we can increase that flow rate if we need to. Okay, so some equipment hazard things that we got to talk about. Nozzle velocity has to be less than 20 feet per second. These are in the code. Okay, the nozzles flush to the ground. Okay, foggers and misters, they have to be fed by potable water sources. That's important. Foggers and misters have to be fed by potable water. Okay, because kids are going to do that. They're going to drink it, right? So it's got to be fed by that potable water. And if your splash pad is open in the twilight hours, you have to have greater than 5 foot candles, UL and NSF wiring and fixtures. Okay, those are just part of the code that's in the design code. Other hazards that might be out there. What hazards do you see? That's why it's important that we're out there and we're looking. Okay, how will you secure your facility if there is a problem? If you do have to close it down, how do you secure it? How do you ensure that people aren't accessing it when you don't want them to? Okay, a first aid kit is required. You've got to have a first aid kit there. It's got to be stocked and it's got to be available for your patrons to use if they need it. All right. That's why it's important that we're out there as well. That's why it's important that we're there If we're there every couple hours testing the water, we're there every couple hours to make sure that people are obeying the rules and things we need them to do. Now, there are some manufacturer issues and things like that. Think how your equipment's going to be used. These are kids. They're going to climb on it. They're going to use it. This is not intended, maybe. Okay. So you have to anticipate those problems. Anticipate the maintenance challenges. There's a lot of maintenance challenges with splash pads. Again, it's such a small body of water that if anything goes wrong, the chemicals are all out of whack. Okay. Pumps go down. The filters leak. The chemical tubing cracks. Okay, and there's a chlorine leak or an acid leak or something. There are a lot of issues with splash pads just because it's such a small body of water, smaller pumps, smaller filters, things like that. Okay, got to be aware of these things and know that we have these potential issues on hand that we might need to anticipate. So having somebody there who knows what they're doing is great. Okay, now let's talk about signage for just a couple of minutes. Okay. Signage, there are very strict guidelines within the state code that says what signage has to be at a splash pad. Okay, your signage has to be in at least 2-inch tall, all caps letters. Okay, 2 inches tall, all caps. At the very top of that sign, centered at the top, it has to have the word caution in all caps. Okay, and then it also has to have these phrases, these 1, 2, 3, 4 phrases right here are direct quotes from the state code. They're in quotations in the state code, which means they've got to be written word for word. Okay, no running on or around the interactive water feature. Children aged 12 and under must have adult supervision. No food, drink, glass, or pets allowed on or around the interactive water feature. Diapers shall only be changed in restrooms. These 4 have to be on your signage. Okay, you have to have a sign. And these are the things that have to be on it. 2 inches tall, all caps, caution, centered at the top with these 4 rules word for word. Okay, there's your code, R392-302-47, parentheses 7. It lists what, if you need these again, that's exactly where it lists these things. Okay. Other things that should probably be on your sign that aren't specifically spelled out, but again, if it's on your sign, at least 2 inches tall, all caps letters. Unsupervised, no lifeguard on duty. The hours of operation and closure procedures of that splash pad. That this is not potable water. And it prohibits other uses like skateboarding and rollerblading and things like that. Okay? All right. Employee safety is also important. You got to have a hazard communication plan, PPE, and chemical safety training. Okay? You have employees who are going to be using some chemicals. You want to make sure you prevent incompatible chemicals from mixing. Make sure you separate your acids from your bleaches. Separate your hydrochloric acid, your muriatic acids from your chlorine that you're using for sanitation. Okay, make sure there's safe access to vaults like ladders. Sumps and tanks are confined spaces. Okay, your holding tank is a confined space. It needs to be marked that it's a confined space. Okay. Needs to be marked. This is danger, confined space, no entry, no authorized entry. Okay, you need to make sure you're marking these things. Those confined spaces are life-threatening. You got to make sure you do it right. So you got to have a program around confined spaces, permits and limits and things like that. Got to use your meters, gas detection and ventilation and training. Proper equipment and rescue services have to be in place if you're going to go into your confined spaces. Okay, if you're going to go in there and clean them or do whatever. Okay. You need to follow the proper protocols because these are confined spaces. You need to make sure that you treat them like they're confined spaces. Okay. I know there was a lot. We went through a lot and we went through it pretty quickly. Okay. But they're great. Splash pads are awesome. Okay. They're really cool. There's some cool stuff out there. Okay. But you got to have eyes wide open to the possible pitfalls. Make sure that you have people trained. You have good policies and procedures in place, and you document how you're taking care of your facilities. This is the key to make sure that they're safe and they're fun and that we keep people healthy. We got to be present at the splash pads. You can't just treat them like it's a fountain in a park. Okay? You got to have somebody present there. You have to be testing and making sure your water chemistry is always where it needs to be. We have to be present at our splash pads. You can't, again, just treat them like it's a fountain. Got to be present. You got to have somebody there who is taking the chemicals and making presence known So we make sure that people stay safe on these things. All right. What do we got, Jason? Any questions?
I've got no questions in here. I've been trying to prod them along a little bit, but they haven't brought forward any questions. Folks, if you've got questions, type those in the chat box right now. You can find it in your control panel there. Just type those questions in, and we'd love to answer those right at this point. Great presentation, Mike. Lots of important stuff. It seems like these splash pads some days are, you look at them, oh, hey, this is easy. This is zero maintenance. We just turn it on and walk away. But that's not really the case, is it?
No, not at all. And that's the thing is you think it's just like running through the sprinklers at home, right? Just turn it on, let the kids have fun, turn it off when they're done. There's a lot that goes into this. There's a lot of prep. There's a lot of maintenance. There's a lot of daily stuff that we've got to do to make sure that they stay safe.
Absolutely. Well, I don't think we prodded them along enough. I got zero questions here. Here's one quick thought on there. When you're designing these, we talked about surfacing, that you can do a broom concrete surface or a rubber surface. Is one better than another? I'll tell you my opinion if you want to hear it.
my opinion is the broom concrete's better.
That's where I stand as well.
Yeah.
And the reason is there's the maintenance side of it. It's far easier to maintain, but in my mind, it's a mental thing. If you know you're running on concrete, you're probably more careful.
Yeah, you are. Yeah.
So, all right. Question: can we get a copy of this presentation to share with our maintenance crews? Thanks for all the information.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll send that out to you. We'll send out the presentation. If you've got questions, please feel free to get in touch with me. There's my phone number and my email address. I'm happy to help with calculating turnover rates and looking at your chemical, your chlorine procedures. I do our Trust Aquatic program here, where we go around and we check out all the swimming pools in the state and of our insured, not all the pools in the state. That would be terrible. But we do see a vast majority of them. So if you got questions, please feel free to get in touch, and I'm happy to help.
And just on that subject, we are recording the session, and I'll get it edited, and we'll put it up on our YouTube channel, hopefully later this afternoon, and then you can share that with others and go back and review it if you'd like.
Yep.
Okay, I think that wraps it up for the day. Final words?
Cool. Nope, just go out and be safe with these things. They're fun. They're a good time, but we got to take care of them. Got to take care of them.
Awesome. Have a safe day, folks.
Thanks, everyone.